The reef muse. Most mandarin fish are doomed to a life of starvation in home aquaria, but it needn't be so. Nathan Hill looks at how to avoid a tragedy. Words by Nathan Hill. Isn't it beautiful? Spend any time at all around a decent reef system and you'll be lucky enough to see one of these in the flesh. I've known of folks who've just set up dedicated aquaria just to keep this fish. It's a hobby ambassador. It's an underwater muse. This is the mandarin fish, often called the mandarin blenny and sometimes called the mandarin dragonet, Synchleropus splendidus. The most accurate name is the dragonet one, with the mandarin belonging to a large genus, some 43 species of a large family, 12 genera, that is Calliomyidae. The dragonets, the little dragons. Many dragonets are cryptic, camouflaged with mottled patterns, and blending in effortlessly with the substrates they inhabit. The mandarin has no interest in such caution and chooses instead to dress itself as the most flamboyant fish on the sheltered lagoons it calls home. Feeling blue. When seen in person, what hits you is the uniqueness of the colours. Mandarins don't even possess scales, let alone reflective ones, but they do appear to have a sheen like no other. Well, that's biological. They really do have a sheen like no other. While many fish use chromatophores to reflect light and give them many colours we see, mandarins have cyanophores, stacks of blue-coloured proteins that give them theirs. This is rare. Only one other vertebrate does this, and it's a close cousin of the mandarin. The amount of colour in an individual may vary given the few types available, including blue, red and green. Hopefully, these names make it obvious what to expect from each. All this does raise a question. How does such a small fish defend itself if it refuses to camouflage? In some cases, when distressed, a mandarin may take the cowardly option and bury itself, plunging itself into substrates with a turn of speed you'd never expect. But if things like sea slugs have taught us anything, it's that you don't get to be that in-your-face ostentatious unless you have some chemical defence up your sleeve. Mandarins contain two types of secretory cells. Goblet cells to produce the protective mucus found on all fishes. A fish's slime is its first defence against diseases and comes packed with all manner of defensive antibodies, while a distinctive second type, known as the sacciform cells, produce a toxic ingredient. In this part, the mucus is toxic upon contact with other fish, especially if it gets into open wounds. But it also stinks terribly, and we can safely assume tastes bad as well, and many researchers have commented over the years. It may also be the case that this slime coat is so repugnant that it even wards off dangers below the sand line, such as predatory worms or lurking parasitic copepods waiting for a host to pass by. And it could help to explain why mandarins seem less prone to white spot infections than other species. Life in the slow lane. By day, mandarins are sluggish. Their benthic lifestyle down amongst the rocks and corals doesn't require much exertion. Part of their charm comes from their main choice of locomotion, propped on their enlarged pelvic fins as they waddle from place to place in short lurches. They can swim in other ways, rapidly when attacking each other, or powerfully up through the water column to spawn, but these are kept for special occasions. Take note, the big obvious fins you see there aren't the pectoral fins. Look closer and you will see the pectoral fins, broad but transparent, flapping frenzied at each side. Their activity is pretty much continuous, and because mandarins feed constantly, it is in this area where almost all efforts in their care come crashing down. Feeding is supported by wider considerations of their setup, and the four you need to take into account are: tank mates need to be non-competitive. As you'll see later on, the mandarin's diet is niche and hard to supply, so the last thing you want is to house it alongside a tank of ravenous or boisterous feeders with the same tastes. Live rock. Real or synthetic, you need heaps of the stuff. I suggest a good 35 kilograms or more per fish, all for its lovely porosity and the indirect nourishment it'll provide. Running time. New tanks and mandarins are a no. You might as well be putting the fish into a blender. That's how little chance they stand. Perhaps consider adding one when your reef has been running for about 6 months. Then put it off another 6 months before you purchase. Never rush a mandarin fish. Refugiums. The holy grail of mandarin fish care. Hang-on back model will be fine. You just want somewhere off the main tank system and off the prying mouths to act as your food farm. The goal of all this is to provide a continuous and abundant copepod population, and by addressing the 4 aforementioned areas, you're well on the way of doing so. And why copepods? Because mandarins will thrive on little else. Some aquarists have reported limited success in offering dry foods to mandarins. I know of one report that used a ship-in-a-bottle approach, literally using bottles to house pellets so that the other fish couldn't reach them. With the bottle safely positioned on the base, the mandarin would eventually have its fill while tank mates could do nothing but watch before it sauntered back out again. But that's predicated on a mandarin that eats dried food, and the majority will not. Some might pick it up, roll it around, spit it out again, but most will blank the stuff like it's an old school friend trying to sell them a pyramid scheme. Artemia falls wide of the mark, if only nutritionally, but it's easy to hatch. As an occasional fidder, it's worth having to hand, but as a staple diet, it's pretty useless. Copepods, amphipods, ostracods, a cornucopia of tiny crawlers is what you need. Stuck up on a varied range, making sure that you source benthic copepods and not pelagic ones, which will swim around briefly out of the reach of the mandarins before being quaffed by ravenous filters, and be sure to keep reintroducing populations periodically. If you can manage that, that's the single greatest hurdle to care cleared. After that, the only problem you'll face is territoriality. The urge with such pretty fish is to buy several, but do that with mandarins and they'll batter each other. Although their mouths are tiny, they're persistent, and 2 fish will twist around each other and chomp for a minute or more until the time when one is exhausted. Fights are intense, and frankly, a side of the fish that fast shakes off any illusion of them being meek or peaceful. I've seen them go at other smaller dragonets before too. Still, mandarins are to be cherished. Yes, they are hard work. Yes, getting them to eat is difficult. But after you've let one into your life, come to love its quirks and appreciated its aloofness, you shall forever miss it like a departed friend when it's gone. Scientific name, Synchropus splendidus. Pronunciation, Synchropus splendidus. Size 7 centimeters. Origin from Japan down to Australia. Habitat shallow lagoons over rubble and coral from 1 meter deep. Tank size 100 by 30 by 30 centimeters. Temperature 24 to 26 degrees Celsius. Temperament peaceful with everything except its own species and occasionally other dragonets. Feeding copepods and more copepods. A committed carnivore. Availability and cost. Common enough, but always check the fish isn't completely emaciated before buying. Prices usually start around £30. Copepod reserve. No room for a refugium? All is not lost. You can create a protected zone for copepod growth by placing an inverted basket-type plant pot over some choice live rocks. In this safe haven, copepods can grow and reproduce away from the mandarins' mouths. But once they'll naturally overspill out of it, they're fair game.